purposes, Your Honor, I'll identify the exhibit number in just a moment. This is, of course, the evidence of Ms. Lauer's telephone call that's already been put in evidence.
It's number 158.
Thank you very much. 158. Sure.
911, do you need police, fire, medical?
Maybe both. I'm not sure. There's just someone screaming outside.
Okay, what's the address that they're near? Is this in the Twin Lake Homes in Sanford?
Yes.
Okay, and is it a male or female?
It sounds like a male.
And you don't know why?
I don't know why. I think they're yelling help, but I don't know. Just send someone quick. Say stop.
Okay. Does he look hurt?
I can't see him. I don't want to go out there. I don't know what's going on. So they're sending him.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your number?
There's gunshots.
You just heard gunshots?
Yes.
Okay. You heard the gunshot towards the end of what the recording?
Yes.
Okay. And I know, again, from different perspectives, but with your knowledge of the information of this case, that was the same gunshot that you heard from inside your house?
It didn't sound the same. It sounded more like a rock hitting my window because I was inside.
Of course. But I'm saying with your knowledge of the case now and your testimony here, you know it was the same gunshot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounded much different from across the street, if you will, across the pathway and inside Miss Lauer's apartment, correct?
Correct.
You didn't hear your voice on that tape, though, did you?
No.
You obviously did say what you said to them, correct?
Correct.
And the mere fact that it doesn't show up on the tape doesn't suggest that you didn't say it, does it?
I know what I said.
Okay. Just wasn't recorded on the tape.
You're also talking about someone that's probably inside their house, and I'm
Sure.
around
Not
the corner.
challenging you, I'm sorry. Not challenging you. Ms. Lauer said she heard you as well. I'm not challenging what you said or not, just that it wasn't on the tape. Using that gunshot as a reference point, I want to sort of take you back in time just a little bit. Just before the call, a few seconds before the call, is when you turned around and went back inside your condo or your townhome? Is that accurate?
You said a few seconds before I made the call?
Before the gunshot? So using the gunshot as a point of reference, because you remember hearing the gunshot when you were dialing 911, correct?
I was inside, correct.
Yeah. So I'm trying to go backwards in time, if you don't mind me trying it this way. So you know the gunshot that you heard here was the gunshot that you heard, correct? Let's just go back. And when that gunshot happened, you were on the phone to 911. Or just
I was
dialing.
waiting for someone to pick me up, correct.
Okay. And then, of course, we heard your 911 call that says, just heard a gunshot.
Correct.
So your 911 call starts after the gunshot, correct?
Correct.
And it was only a few seconds before that gunshot that you were outside looking at the two individuals in the ground and pound positioning.
Correct.
You are certain, are you not, that it was the person on the bottom who was yelling to you?
Not 100% certain.
I'm sorry?
Not 100% certain. But it did sound like it was coming from the person on the bottom.
So when you say not 100%, I just want to drill into that a little bit. And again, knowing that you want to be literal and very cautious with what you testify to, but using your common sense, when you were listening to the sound of the yelling, where was it coming from?
It sounded like the person on the bottom.
And was it coming as though it was coming straight towards you, unobstructed?
I would say yes.
Could you relate any of those two helps, or how many helps did you hear?
It could have been 1, 2, possibly 3. I think it was only a few.
Okay, just a few. Could you relate those, now that you've listened to this tape, where that you may have heard those yelps or helps on this tape?
No.
The yells that you heard, however, or the helps that you heard, however many there were, it was always the same voice, correct?
That I personally heard?
Yes.
Yes.
There was no second voice yelling anything, was there?
Not that I heard.
And when you ran outside, or when you went outside that time that you went out to your porch, you actually told him to stop, right?
I said, "What's going on? Cut it out. Stop,"
Cut it out.
something like that.
Okay. And the person who we now know to be Trayvon Martin on top didn't stop, did he?
No one stopped.
He didn't even acknowledge that you were there?
I don't remember seeing anyone turn around.
Did he turn and look at you even?
No.
He just kept doing what he was doing,
Yes.
even though you asked him to stop.
I guess I asked him, yes.
Mr. Delorianda asked you about a gun. You never saw a gun, did you?
No.
There wasn't a gun in anybody's hands that you could see, was there?
Not that I could see.
Did it seem like Mr. Zimmerman was trying, I'm talking now about the period of time where the ground and pound was occurring, the straddling. Did it seem like Mr. Zimmerman was trying to get up?
I didn't watch it long enough to even be able to tell on that. I might have stated when they were in the other position, it possibly looked like that, but not in the sidewalk part.
Oh, okay. And I, again, truly do appreciate you focusing on what you said and when you said it. But when they were one on top of the other before Mr. Martin got into the straddle position, that's when it looked to you like George was trying to get up, George Zimmerman was trying to get up?
Yes.
Okay. And how was he doing that?
Well, there's a person on top of him. I didn't think he wanted to stay on the ground.
Yeah, I'm just trying, if you would, for the jury to describe how it was that you saw Mr. Zimmerman trying to get up from the position with Trayvon Martin on top of him.
I couldn't tell you how he was trying to get up.
Can you just describe it for us?
What do you want me to describe if I can't tell you what it looked like?
Just trying to visualize for the jury what it was that when you said, the guy in the bottom trying to get up, what you meant by that.
Like I said, if a person's on top of you, you're not wanting to stay on the ground. So once again, rationally thinking, I was thinking the person on the bottom would be trying to get up.
And did you see any movements by George Zimmerman to accomplish that? Or was it just sort of a struggle that you saw him trying to get up?
I couldn't see anyone when I first went out there until he slid out from where I could actually see him a little bit. And that's when I knew it was a second person, and that's when I figured the person on the bottom was trying to get up.
When was the first time that you noticed Mr. Zimmerman's clothing?
Just as I just stated.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Just as I just stated right before, in that very initial.
Okay, and then you could see that he was wearing red?
It was a different color than the person on top was wearing, yes, red or white.
So, going through now for a moment your statements and who you first spoke with and when. You first had an opportunity to speak to, do you recall the first person that you did?
And what do you mean by speak to? First
Or write out a
statement?
statement or do
That
anything?
would have been the police.
I'm sorry?
That would have been the police.
Okay. And you recall filling out a handwritten statement yourself?
Yes.
And do you perceive any inconsistencies in your testimony today and what you wrote out on the statement?
I would say the only thing I did was clarify,
Today?
or in any other statements that I had from that first one.
Okay. you were consistent back then that it was a straddle position where the person on top was straddling the person on the bottom in red, and the person on the bottom was getting hit, was yelling help, correct?
But I didn't mean to say that they were yelling help while they were getting hit.
Okay,
That was clarifying, and also what was being done was clarified.
gotcha. And then you also talked to investigator Serino,
Correct.
and that was that same day?
Later that night.
Okay. And you gave him an oral or recorded statement, correct?
Correct.
And it was in that statement the same day that you described the straddle position as being an MMA style, correct?
Correct.
And it was that very night when the words ground and pound first were talked about, correct?
Correct.
And then you also talked to the media, actually found you out, didn't they? I think next day or two.
They came to my house every day and pretty much harassed us for the next 6 months.
And until you realized, I guess, that you could close the door and not answer it, you actually answered one door knock, and they sort of had a reporter there talking to you with you behind the door. Remember that?
That was the next morning, correct?
Mm-hmm. And similarly, you told them the same thing that we've talked about here today, right? The guy on the bottom in the red was getting beat up.
Correct.
And also, as well, saying that at that point that he was yelling for help.
Correct.
Then about a month later, FDLE, John Batchelor, spoke with you at an extended interview where he went over the same information.
I had another interview in between that with Serino again.
Oh, you are right. Again, except for clarifying what was happening, no inconsistencies with the story that you gave the first night, correct?
Just clarifying.
And then we get to John Batchelor's conversation.
Correct.
He went into greater detail, correct, about what happened?
Excuse me?
He went into pretty good detail with you about what happened?
In detail of what happened from my point of view? Because
Exactly,
he didn't know.
yeah.
Yes.
He had to explain a lot about it.
Yes.
And again, everything in there you still stand by and was consistent with what you've told us here today and every other statement you've given, correct?
Yes.
Tell me why you initially thought that this just, tell me why you initially thought that this may have just been a dog fight of some sort. Why did that come to mind?
Like I said, we have a lot of dogs that get walked back there. Maybe a dog got loose. I have no idea. It was Daytona 500 weekend. People were probably partying.
Any problems that you have actually in the neighborhood with dogs or dogs getting loose or anything?
Nothing out of the ordinary from just getting off the leash, maybe.
I have a moment if you approach the clerk, Your Honor. Number 4. Let me show you what is in evidence as State's Exhibit 45. You can take a look at that for a moment. Do you recognize who that is?
No.
Okay.
Now I do. Not at the time.
Right, at the time you didn't. That person, is that the clothing that you saw that night?
I can't say it's exactly the clothing, but it was definitely a red or a lighter color.
Okay. Does that red seem like the color red that you saw on the bottom that night?
Possibly.
Okay. One more moment, you're almost done. Just have a moment to look again, just to identify this photograph. Rather than wasting time, what I think I'll do is show it to him, not publish it to the jury until I identify the number, just so we can clarify that. It's in evidence, I just can't find the number just yet. I might have posted with this one.
Yes, you may.
I can take a look at this. I actually do need to mark this one out on top of the show to you. Defendant's double E for identification purposes for right now. And can you tell me, is the clothing that that person wearing similar to the clothing on the person who is on top?
The person on the right, yes.
Okay, so yeah, certainly not the 7-Eleven clerk. I apologize. The person on the in the center of the photograph.
Correct.
Person to the right. Similar clothing to the person that you saw on top on night of
Same
February
colors,
22nd?
yes.
Thank you. Without objection, I would like to enter that into evidence room. I would not mind suggesting there's no objection. I mean, if there's no objection.
Is there any objections?
I have no objection.
Okay, that'll come in as Defense Exhibit 18. And that's double E.
Yeah, I'd like to quickly dispose to the jury if I might. During your interview, you had actually prepared a sketch of what you saw that night. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Any objections to just putting this in as evidence? It's simply a blow-up.
This is his.
That's,
No objections?
No, I apologize, no objection, Your Honor.
Okay, it'll come in as defense exhibit number 19.
thank you. Again, I have first, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Can you identify this as a blow-up of a sketch that you prepared?
Yes, it's my horrible stick figures.
Okay, well, in addition to not knowing how long you've been married, now we know your artistic abilities, but let's do this if you would. Explain to the jury what you intended to do with this sketch and then tell us what it depicts.
What I tried to do is say where the door in the house that I came out of was, where they first were, who was on top, who was on bottom, and then where it moved to.
Okay. So to clarify, this is your patio area,
Correct.
and this was what your perspective you were looking out at this scene here first?
First, correct.
Okay. This scene really belongs here, just later in time? Is that
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a progressive,
right?
supposedly supposed to be a progressive
Right.
picture.
So this is what you're looking at from here to here first,
Correct.
and from here to here second, although this path is actually the same path, correct?
Correct. And then the third one is where, away from where I saw him on the second part, the body ended up.
Okay, so tell me the legend, if you would, and explain what you were indicating with this.
This is depicting them laying how I was stating earlier, the one on the black top on top and the one on the red and white on bottom.
Okay,
And then it moves to the sidewalk, laying this way,
okay.
with still the person with the black shirt on top and the red shirt on bottom.
Okay, is this now where they're in the straddle position
Correct.
with Trayvon Martin on top?
Yeah, I could not draw that.
That's fine, but I just want to orient the jury to that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
And then tell me what this number 3 is right here.
3 is when I went upstairs while I was still on phone with 911 and looked down, and the body was, I don't know, it's not in the same position that I left him in.
Right, you left them in, they were more closer and actually had part of their bodies on the cement pathway, correct?
They were on the sidewalk, yes, and then the body was closer to where I was,
Right, and
After.
so when you looked out from, did you look out from upstairs?
upstairs.
Then you saw Trayvon Martin's body, correct? Between the pathway and your complex, your townhome.
Correct.
Okay. And I see you have, again, a stick figure. Have you seen the photographs taken of Trayvon Martin as he lay just after the shot?
I do not believe so.
Would you defer to do you know did you see anyone move the body at all?
I
after
think
you
I
saw
believe
it?
I saw him flip him because he was laying face down,
Okay.
flip him over and try to give him CPR.
So when you first saw him from upstairs, he was laying face down.
Correct.
Did you see the other person?
He was on the sidewalk,
Okay.
standing up.
Okay. Did you see anybody else? The man with the flashlight?
That's when
right?
the guys from the flashlights came around the corner.
Okay. So from the time of the gunshot, when you were just on the phone calling 911, to the time when you looked out to see Trayvon Martin's body in the position you just described it, and George Zimmerman, I think you said walking about, about how long was that delay?
I don't know. I'm sure if you spliced the phone call, you could figure that out to the T.
Okay, so if we were to look at your phone call, you sort of acknowledge having just heard the gunshot, correct? And then you also acknowledge, I see someone outside, correct?
Correct.
And that's about the timeline that you would say was accurate as to
That's when I'm walking upstairs. Yes.
having heard the gunshot, walk upstairs. Tell me if you would, I'm sorry. Tell the jury, if you would, you hear the gunshot when you are dialing 911, then tell me your movement until you get to an area where you can see Trayvon Martin's body.
It was a walking movement upstairs as I was trying to spell out twin trees 3 times. And when I finally made it to the bathroom area is when I looked down because we have a window, and that's when I saw the body.
Okay. I'm just going to ask you to do it a little bit slower. Were you actually still on the staircase when you dialing 911?
I was possibly heading up at that time
Up the staircase?
when I finally got a hold of him.
Okay.
Her. I believe.
Continued walking, got out. Did you go into one of the back bedrooms?
The master bedroom.
And is there a balcony or some window out there?
There's a window in the bathroom and a window in the actual room.
And which window did you look out?
I believe it was the bathroom window.
Okay. Again, it is what it is, but could have been one of the two windows.
I believe it was the bathroom window.
And we will defer the exact timing. Do you remember when you were on the phone with the 911 operator that you said something acknowledging that you had just seen the body at the time you saw it?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah,
Can you
I
repeat it?
just kept rolling on. I apologize. If we're going to listen to the 911 tape, on that tape, there's a time when you say, there's somebody outside and I think he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the precise moment or very close in time to when you saw the body you just described?
That's when I looked down.
And you saw it?
Correct.
So we can defer to the tape then for a pretty much exact time delay between the shot and when you saw the body.
Not the exact time the shot was fired, but from when I stated I just heard a shot when I was on the phone with him, yes.
Got it. I might have a moment. Rose. Then just to clarify the last thing we talked about. You look out and you see Trayvon Martin's body. And then you said you saw George Zimmerman walking about, correct?
Standing, walking, yes,
Okay,
but on the
sure.
sidewalk.
And then you also said you saw two guys with flashlights?
I think it was two guys with flashlights coming around the corner.
Okay. Could you tell, in fact, that one of them was an officer?
No,
Okay.
I just saw a flashlight.
Because again, at this point, it's still quite dark out there, correct?
Correct.
I couldn't tell if you said that your porch light was on.
It was on.
Okay. Was it on the whole night?
Yes.
Okay. And it's one of those porch lights that point down, correct?
It's a light bulb inside of a globe.
Right, above, in the ceiling above.
Correct.
It's not one of these lights that illuminate the outside area,
It's not a
correct?
floodlight, no.
Okay. Does it illuminate outside of the porch area at all?
Maybe just a little bit.
A few feet?
I would say possibly, yes.
Certainly not enough to increase your ability to see what you've now talked about happening near the pathway, though, correct?
No.
And the voice screaming for help, however many times that you heard it, it was just one person's voice?
When I heard it outside,
Yes.
I believe it was just one person's voice, yes.
And you now believe that that was George Zimmerman's voice, correct?
I never said that.
Do
I
you
said
believe?
it could have been his, but I was not 100% sure.
I'm not asking for 100% certainty. I'm asking you to use your common sense and to tell us if you think that that was George Zimmerman's voice screaming for help, the person on the bottom.
That's just my opinion.
Nothing further on.
Thank you. Have you read it right?
Definitely, from your vantage point to the right, as you drew in the diagram right here.
Feet, yes.
I apologize, yes.
Heads were towards
The heads were towards the T.
correct.
Is that correct?
The T of the sidewalk.
Yes, I apologize. The T is the
Yes.
sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I apologize. Let me get you back here a while. I think I got the right. You were asked about statements you gave, interviews you gave. Forget about the news. You originally talked to an officer, right, at the scene
Correct.
that night. Then you ended up talking to a detective later on, correct?
Correct.
And then you ended up talking to somebody from FDLE, correct?
Are you going in order of all the times
I
I
think
spoke
I've
with
got that
someone?
right. Well, I'll skip the news right now.
Okay.
Right, you talked to somebody from FDLE.
I believe I did another interview with Sereno on the phone as
I
well.
apologize. Serena on the phone, right? And then you ended up at some point talking to me, and I took a statement from you, too.
FDLE, then you, yes, correct.
Yes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that certain questions were not asked of you at the beginning that were asked later on in the later interviews?
New questions, correct.
Right?
Yeah.
In the first interview, you were not asked to elaborate on certain things that later on at the end you were asked to elaborate, correct?
Correct.
In other words, nobody had asked you before whether you heard this, correct?
No.
And I asked you that, correct?
Yes.
And you did not, for purpose of the record, hear that, correct?
No.
In fact, what Mr. O'Mara said, not getting into, but he actually pounded on his cement here, you did not hear that either, correct?
No.
Now, one of the interviews I believe you gave with Sereno, Mr. O'Mara asked you about ground and pound.
Correct.
Do you recall that? Could it be that it was Investigator Sereno that used the words ground and pound and not you?
I believe it was me because it was in my initial statement as well.
Okay. So you initially, in the original statement to the officer, put ground and pound?
Possibly.
Okay. You know, I'm going to show you this, and add person witness, Sean.
Should have it marked for an identification exhibit. Yeah, I need a paper change here. It's for identification. It's marked for identification purposes.
Okay, I've seen it, yes, thank you.
Add person witness, Sean. To show you what's been marked for identification purposes, 25.
It should be 2S.
I'm sorry, 2S, I apologize. Just read it and see if you use the words ground and pound there.
Is the proper impeachment, Your Honor? I don't know if
I
that's what's
don't
going
know.
on, but,
I don't know if it's impeachment or recollection.
okay.
Is there an objection?
I withdraw it then, until we see where it goes.
I say ground getting hit.
Okay. But would you agree that in that interview with the first officer, you did not use the words ground and pound?
It wasn't an interview, it was a written statement.
I apologize.
So by the time I probably gave my testimony to Sereno, I might have thought about that's what it looked like to give a better description.
Yes, sir. And you believe that you used the words ground and pound in the better description to Sereno, is that correct?
I believe that's better described, yes.
Okay. So you elaborated a little bit more from the
Yes.
first, correct?
I
And then you
clarified.
elaborated a little more in deposition too, correct?
I clarified,
You had to clarify certain things, would that be accurate?
yes,
And why was it? You felt it was important to clarify certain things that you had previously said or
to
elaborate?
give a better visual.
Okay. Now, let me have a moment, Your Honor. I apologize. I'm going to ask you a few questions, then we'll come back to that if we could. The porch light, just to clarify, it's not on the ceiling, it's actually outside and it's attached to the wall, but it's high up.
It's like right at the catty corner of the ceiling and wall face.
Okay. But it illuminates out into the yard.
I wouldn't say out into the yard, but it definitely illuminates that patio area.
The concrete slab.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to have another object, marker location. You mentioned an interview you gave to Sereno. And that was on February 26th.
Would you just, I'm sorry, would you just identify the document?
Is it me?
I would just,
I'm not introducing.
I think that if there's going to be any questions about this, I would ask that the audio be used as the impeachment or refreshing, and the reason why is because,
Okay, I don't,
Oh,
if
sorry.
there's an objection, I need to hear the objection. And I don't do speaking objections.
okay, so I'm going to be
So-
precise. Improper foundation.
Okay, he hasn't even had it identified, can we wait for that? Don't answer any questions regarding that, but if you need him to identify it, you may do so. Yes.
Let me ask you this. I'll be glad to clarify. You gave an interview with Detective Sereno, right?
Correct.
Okay. You used the word MMA, do you
Correct.
recall? You believe you used the word ground and pound.
I believe so.
Could it
If
have
not,
been-
I did say getting hit on the ground, which would be
Okay.
equivalent in MMA as ground and pound.
Okay. Could it have been that Sereno used the word ground and pound?
It could have been.
Okay, thank you. But you, as best you could, in elaborating what you believe was going on there, used language based on MMA, what you had seen on TV and stuff like that.
To give
Correct.
a better description. Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
To describe the straddling position, one person over another.
Correct.
Okay. Did you mean to imply by that that there was actually blows inflicted like they do on MMA?
Correct.
But did you actually see those blows going?
I only saw downward movement.
You can't say that there was actually blows inflicted on the person on the ground.
I could not see that.
Okay. You also were asked about the one, two, or three times you heard the word help.
Mhm.
You believe it was the person on the bottom. Is that correct?
I believe
You're
it
not
was-
100% sure, but you believe just because of, you believe that the person on the bottom would be the one yelling for help.
Correct.
Is that what your conclusion or common sense or assumptions is based on?
And that's when I first saw the person on the bottom, yes.
Okay. Now, and you said also, because I think if you felt the person on the top was yelling for help, that it would not have been able, you would not have come towards you, in other words, the voice would not have carried towards where you are, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, could it be that the person on top was yelling help, and since he was face up, face down, it would have been towards the ground and not you?
I would object on speculation.
He can testify as to what he has actually seen.
I didn't see anyone's mouth moving, so no, I can't confirm that.
You can't say that the person on the top was yelling for help, but his voice would have gone into the ground and you would not have been able to hear that. You can't say he wasn't yelling for help.
Well, that would have sounded muffled, I would think.
But did you hear that?
I didn't hear a muffled help. No.
Okay. And you never saw the person on the bottom's hands in terms of whether he had a gun or not at that time? You couldn't say?
No.
You couldn't say one way or the other, correct?
No.
And did I understand you correctly when you responded to Mr. Romero's question that you can't say whether the person at the bottom was trying to get up, correct? You can't say whether he was or not. He may have been. You don't know. And the
I
person-
stated the person on the bottom was probably trying to get up, but I couldn't confirm that. But anyone on the bottom, I would think, would be trying to get up.
Just from common sense.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
In the several statements that you gave, I know you gave several statements, I guess you felt the need, or you weren't either asked questions to specify certain things that you later were asked, correct? Is that
Correct.
correct? By the investigating agencies or whoever, correct?
Correct.
Or you felt the need that you needed to clarify or elaborate on certain things. Is that correct?
Yes, so words weren't put in my mouth, yes.
Does that mean that you were lying originally with what you said to the final statements that you gave?
Can you repeat that?
Does that mean that when you had to clarify or elaborate from the original statement you gave to the final statements that you gave, that you were lying originally?
Lying?
Yeah, does that mean that originally you were lying?
No.
Because you didn't clarify or you didn't elaborate, does that mean that originally you were lying because you weren't asked a certain question?
No, it was just the question was omitted.
The
was
question was
never
never
asked.
asked of you?
Correct.
I don't know, moment. States Exhibit 77. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Good, you mentioned at the very end of, or towards the end of Mr. Romero's cross-examination, that you had gone upstairs, and I think you stated you looked out and you saw what you now know is the victim, Trayvon Martin, on the ground. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then at some point you saw the person you now know is the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, standing up, correct?
Correct.
And then you saw one or two guys with flashlights.
Correct.
Is that, you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Let me show you State's Exhibit 77. You recall when you looked out, Mr. Martin being like that?
No, it was opposite view, so I would be looking the opposite way. But yes, the body did look like that.
The body looked in this position?
If
No,
I
no.
was standing over there looking that way, yes.
Okay. My point is, the body was face down.
Face down, yes.
Your Honor, may I publish that to the jury?
Yes, you may.
And Mr. Good, just make clear, State's Exhibit 77, your vantage point would have been different, but the body was in this position, in other words, face down.
Correct.
And you talked a lot about MMA. Are you MMA trained at all?
I don't think I'm in shape to do that now.
Okay. And do you know whether either Mr. Zimmerman or Mr. Martin were MMA trained at all?
I didn't know either people.
Thank you. No further questions.
Just a few on the new areas that we're going into.
Do we need, anybody need a break? Yes, okay. Can we,
It's gonna be about 5 to 10 minutes, but no more
Can
than
you
that,
wait?
but your call.
okay, go ahead.
You can wait,
I'll talk to the jury, not you, go ahead.
okay, I'm sorry, Ron.
Thank you.
If I could. is this a copy of your statement given that night, most contemporaneous with what was happening?
Yes,
Is that the document that you were questioned about as far as what words you used and how you wrote down what you perceived at the first opportunity that you had to perceive it?
I wasn't questioned about it, but I was given it to write a statement.
Okay, and that is accurate, is it not, as you wrote that night?
From what I saw that night, yes.
Okay, I'll move this into evidence, Your Honor, as our next exhibit.
Standing objection, Your Honor.
Okay, please approach.
Good, for the delay. The statement that you gave to Chris Serino, the chief investigator Serino on this case, that was correct as best you could remember the incident the way you viewed it, right?
Correct.
Was page and a half, correct? It was actually
I think it was audio.
telephone and it was transcribed. Then you had another one with her, correct?
Correct.
And all of those statements included some the other, correct? Just because of the way the questions were being asked?
I don't know about facts, but
Okay.
they needed more clarification.
Sure. And then, of course, we took your deposition, and I think that was 50 pages or so, correct?
Correct.
And again, we asked you questions, and you just answer the questions as best you can.
Correct.
And Mr. Delariando wanted to make sure that the jury understands that just the fact that you have statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, and statement 4 that are not all exactly the same, you weren't lying, were you?
No.
Okay. You were just answering the questions that were being asked, right?
Correct. Some had more than the other ones, yes.
As best you could remember of that event back then, correct?
Correct.
And you even said that the adrenaline was flowing, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was an event where you sort of hyper-focused on what was happening once you realized it was serious?
For a few seconds and turned and went back inside, yes.
Sure. Called 911, not something you do every day, right?
Well, after that, yes, but yeah.
Okay. And it was really sort of a traumatic event for you to go through to see what you saw enough to call 911, wasn't it?
It was enough for what I saw to call 911, yes.
Okay. So as you recounted the story time and time and time again, things became more expanded as you were asked those questions?
Yes, but I believe the groundwork stayed the same.
Sure. The groundwork that you saw two guys outside your house, one was on top beating the other one up. That pretty much stayed consistent, didn't it?
Well, that I clarified that I could not actually see punches, but yes, it
Sure.
looked like, yes.
Right. And the
Back to my
guy with the
clarification.
red, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Back to clarifying, yes.
Yeah. And the guy with the red was always on the bottom.
Correct.
That never changed.
That
did
never
it?
changed.
And just to clarify what was actually talked about with Chris Serino, Investigator Serino, that happened?
Yes.
And then Investigator Sereno said a word that I have, and the transcripts may differ, ground, couldn't figure it, maybe he said ground and pound. And then you said, yeah, like a ground and pound on the concrete at this point. So at this point, I told him I'm calling 911.
Improper bolstering.
I'm
I
at
guess.
the end of it. Is that,
What, there's an objection, and the objection is,
Hearsay, improper bolstering.
I would suggest that Rule 108, which is the rule of completeness, suggests that since they brought in part of it, and I'm speaking, I apologize.
the objection is to hearsay is overruled. Bolster.
Sound event.
It looked like that position was a ground and pound type position, but I couldn't tell 100% that there was actually fists hitting faces.
But you did see the guy on the top of the black hoodie pretty much just throwing down blows, and the guy kind of MMA style.
Meaning arm motion going down towards the person on the bottom, correct?
Chris, you're not going to tell the jury here today that you saw a fist hit flesh on face if you didn't actually see it, right?
I wouldn't tell them that anyways because I didn't see it.
Great. Thanks very much. No further questions, John.
Not to elaborate, but the thing that Mr. Romero, that document or the transcript of it, the bottom line, you needed to clarify it after that to make sure that everybody understood that you did not hear or see fist, the guy on top hitting the guy on the bottom. Is that correct?
Both sides made me clarify.
Is that correct?
Correct.
You did not see blows on the guy on the bottom, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. May Mr. Smith be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You are
Actually, Your Honor, he is under subpoena for today. With the, if I might, with this hour, I would like him to stay so that I can talk to him at lunch.
Okay, you're excused from the courtroom, but if you'll please remain outside in one of the witness rooms so counsel can speak with you. Okay, thank you. Do we know if their lunch is here? Okay. I'm hesitant to take a break and then send you to lunch, so and I don't want to start a new witness. No, so I was going to send you back there, but you'll have to wait till your lunch gets here. It'll be a very short period of time. So I don't know. The lunch would be here at noon. We'll be in recess till 1 o'clock. Because I don't think your lunch will be here till noon. So ladies and gentlemen, over the lunch recess, you're not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. You're not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. You're not to get on the internet by using any type of electronic device to do independent research about the case, people, places, things, or terminology. And finally, you're not to read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, or blogs, or text messaging about the case. Do I have your assurances you'll abide by these instructions? Okay, and with that, if you'll please put your notepads face down on the chair and follow Corporal Dennis outside the courtroom. Please be seated, counsel. Is there anything we need to take up before we recess for lunch?
No, Your Honor. Thank you for the additional time for Mr. Romero and I to do what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Court will be in recess till 1.
Jury is present, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen, welcome back. I'm going to ask you my questions again. If your answer is yes, please raise your hand. During the lunch recess, did any of you have any conversations with each other or with anybody else about this case? No hands are being raised. Did any of you read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case? No hands are being raised. Did any of you use any type of an electronic device to get on the internet to do independent research about the case, people, places, things, or terminology? And finally, did any of you read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, social networking pages about the case? Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And Mr. De La Rianda, call your next witness, please.
There we go, Joe Manalo.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony presented will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Okay.
Could you state your name for the record, please, sir?
Jonathan Manalo,
And could you spell your last name?
Manalo.
Are you married, sir?
Yes.
How long have you been married? I always
7
make a
years.
mistake when I ask them.
7 years.
Thank you. And do you have any kids?
Yes.
A daughter?
Yes.
Okay. What do you do for a living, sir?
I work for UPS.
Okay. And how long have you been at that job?
20 years.
I'm not going to ask you about your current address, but do you live in Seminole County, Florida, sir?
Yes.
Okay. How long have you lived in Seminole County, Florida?
About 32 years.
I want to draw your attention back to February of 2012. Were you living at 2861 Retreat View Circle?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time, how long had you lived in that residence?
Approximately 3 years.
Okay. I want to focus on Sunday, February the 26th of 2012. Were you home at around 7:05, 7:10, 7:15 p.m.?
Yes.
And was anyone home with you?
Yes.
Who was home?
My wife and my daughter.
Okay. What were you all doing?
My wife was sitting on the couch, and I was on the floor with my daughter assembling a coffee table we had purchased earlier in the day.
Your wife has already testified about the layout of your residence back in February of 2012. My question to you is, sir, do you recall in terms of outside the residence, was it dark outside at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall the weather conditions that evening?
Yes.
And what were they?
It was raining.
Now, at around 7:10 p.m. or so, did you hear something outside?
Yes.
Could you describe to the jury what you first heard?
It sounded like grunts. We thought at first it was a couple of dogs barking.
And were the grunts, as you described, loud or low?
They were loud enough that I could hear it through the window, but it was still indistinct. I couldn't make anything out of it.
Okay. Did your wife do something?
Yeah, she looked through the window.
Okay. And when she was looking through the window, did you tell her anything about whether she should be looking through the window or not?
Yes, I said, stay away from the window. Don't make it our problem.
Okay. Did she pay attention to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Every day, thousands of people are choosing Advil for their headaches.
My name is.
Did your wife look out the window several times that evening?
I believe so.
Okay. And in terms of what you recall her saying as she was looking out the window, or right after, did she describe something going on outside?
She just said that there were two people fighting, and she sat down, and I think it was around the time she heard the yelling or the gunshot was when she peered through the window.
Okay. Did you yourself hear that gunshot?
Yes.
Okay. I know at some point you ended up going outside, but did you yourself actually ever look through the window to the sliding glass door outside?
No.
In terms of when you heard the gunshot, did you take any action after hearing the gunshot?
I went outside.
Okay. If you could, tell the jury how you would have gone outside, through the back, the sliding door, or did you take another route?
I went through the garage,
Okay. And in going through the garage, did you grab anything on your way out?
a flashlight.
Okay. After you went out through the garage, where did you go and what route did you take to get to where you saw something?
I went to the left, toward the sidewalk, and then I just walked towards the back to the T.
Okay. And when you got back there, did you see a man standing on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay. And did you know that man prior to that night?
No.
Okay. And do you know that person now to be George Zimmerman?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see that person in the courtroom today, sir?
Yes.
And is that the person that just stood up for purpose of the record?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant, George Zimmerman?
The record will so reflect.
When you first saw him, was the defendant standing up or sitting down or laying down?
He was walking towards my direction.
And did he walk directly towards you, or did he stop, or what happened?
He walked directly towards me.
Okay. Now, did you have your flashlight, did you have it illuminating or on?
Yes.
Okay. And was it dark outside?
Yes.
When you observed the defendant, did you say he walked towards you?
Yes.
Did he have anything in his hands when you observed him?
As I came around the corner, I noticed that he had his cell phone to his left ear.
Okay. And was he holding it just to his ear?
Yes, it looked like that,
Okay. And when you say up to his left ear, can you demonstrate?
like this.
Okay. Did you notice any blood on him, sir?
Yes.
And where did you notice the blood?
Down his nostrils, streaming down both sides of his lips, I believe. Of his lips.
Could you tell whether there was any damage to his nose, sir?
No.
And did you subsequently also see some blood on the back of his head?
Yes.
Sir, did you end up taking some photographs using your cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. Specifically, did you take a photograph of the back of his head?
Yes.
Did you take a photograph of the person you now know has been identified as Trayvon Martin on the ground?
Yes.
And did you also take a photograph of a flashlight that was on the ground?
Next to the body, yes.
Okay. And I apologize, it was two flashlights. There was one big flashlight next to the body that you photographed?
Yes.
Okay. Did you use your cell phone to take those photographs?
Yes.
And did you take, using your cell phone, did you use the flash from the cell phone, or did you use the flashlight you had with you?
I used the flashlight.
I'm going to ask you to, if you could, look at over here to the wall to your, thank you, Your Honor. Let me just setting up where you lived at that time, back in February of 2012, showing you for the purpose of the record, State's Exhibit 1 that's been introduced into evidence. This is a Google or aerial photograph of the retreat of Twin Lakes. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to hopefully get this to work and show you the area that I'm going to focus on. Would your residence be right here where I'm pointing to, sir?
Yes.
Okay. The route you took, did you say you went out the garage? Did you take this walkway that I'm
Yes.
pointing the aerial and go back to the back here?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when you came into contact with the defendant when he was walking towards you, where approximately you would have had contact with him? And I'm going to move the arrow around and you tell me where to stop.
A little higher.
Higher?
At the T.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit number 3. Can you see your residence from that photograph, sir?
No.
Okay. State's Exhibit 3, in terms of how dark it was, is this area that I'm pointing to here establish how dark it was out there?
Yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit number 5, does that photograph in any way depict part of your residence, sir?
Yes.
And what part of your residence does that show?
The back patio.
Okay. And am I pointing the area to it?
Yes.
This light that's on, was that on when the shooting and this happened, or was that turned on after?
That was off, and it was turned on after.
And is this the area approximately where you came into contact with the defendant, George Zimmerman?
Yes,
Okay, near where the T is or the dog trash receptacle?
yes,
State exhibit number 6, would this have been your back porch or the pavement that's been described as like the back porch of your residence?
yes.
Okay. State exhibit number 10, what does that photograph show, sir?
Shows the back of my house, the
Okay.
T.
All right. And is this the area you came walking out of when you came into contact with the defendant?
Yes,
State exhibit number 11, do you recognize that?
yes.
Okay, what does that photograph show, sir?
The back of the house and where the crime scene finally ended.
Okay. When you came out there, were all these markers out there when you first came out?
No,
Okay. Were you the first person after the shot that came into contact with anybody out there, the defendant and the victim on the ground?
yes,
Okay. In other words, were there police officers out there when you came out there?
no,
Did police officers arrive subsequent to you being out there?
yes.
Okay. State's exhibit number 34, do you recognize what that is?
Looks like the front of the house?
Okay, and that would have been your residence back in February of 2012?
Yes,
And State's exhibit 35, is that showing just a close-up of that area?
yes,
State's exhibit 37, that's a daytime photograph. Does that show the area that you've been talking about?
yes,
Okay. State's exhibit 40, tell us what that photograph shows, sir.
The sidewalk towards the T,
Okay.
that's where I had taken the path to the back.
When you left out from the garage, you would have taken this route this way?
Yes,
Okay, thank you, sir. State exhibit 76, did you take this photograph, sir?
yes,
Now, it was raining that night, was it not, you said?
yes,
Okay. And do you recall the position that you would have taken this photograph? Obviously, it shows the back of the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman's head. Was he sitting down, standing up, or how was he?
he was squatting.
Okay. And was that after the officers came?
This was before.
Okay. State exhibit 77, what does that photograph show?
I believe that's Trayvon Martin.
Is this the way you found the victim, in this case, Mr. Martin's body?
Yes,
Did you move the body at all?
no,
When you observed Mr. Martin's body, his hands were underneath his body, is that correct, his torso?
yes,
Did you tamper or mess with that at all? In other words, did you move his hands or turn him upside down, or did you do anything like that?
I never left the sidewalk, so no,
This photograph that you would have taken of Mr. Trayvon Martin's body, the light that's shining on there, is that from your flashlight again?
yes,
State Exhibit 78, you took this photograph too, sir, using your cell phone?
yes.
And what were you trying to show in that photograph, sir?
That there was an object next to him that wasn't, I didn't see any other objects on the ground other than a little flashlight on the beginning part of the T. So
And
that
am
one
I-
just stood out.
Okay, and am I pointing to it right here in this photo, this part of the photograph, State Exhibit 78?
Yes,
Is that it?
yes,
And again, the light that's showing on there, is that from your flashlight?
yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm through with, thank you very much. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Manalo, back in February of 2012, specifically February 26th of 2012, showing you State's Exhibit 139, would your residence have been 2861, where I already have your wife's name on there?
Yes.
And does this area depict in terms of you going out the garage and coming around here?
Yes.
Is that what you've described earlier?
Yes.
Thank you. What I want to do now is have you elaborate a little bit about what we talked about, specifically your contact with the defendant. And the flashlight that you saw on the ground that you photographed, was that flashlight on in terms of, was it illuminating?
No.
When you observed the victim in this case, Mr. Martin on the ground, Trayvon Martin on the ground, was he moving at all, or did he say anything when you came upon him?
No.
Now, I apologize if I've already asked you, did you say his hands and arms that were under his torso, his hands were?
Yes.
If you could, tell the jury when you first came into contact with the defendant, when you observed him, if you said anything to him and if he said anything to you, please tell us what happened.
Okay, I came around the corner, and he was walking to me, and I asked him, do I need to call 911? He says, no, I just got off the phone with him. And then he asked me...
At that point, did you see a gun, sir?
No, I did not see a gun.
Did you, other than when the police got there, did you see a gun on the defendant?
No.
Did it appear to you as if the defendant had been in a fight, sir?
Yes.
Did he speak to you, sir?
Yes.
Did he respond to your questions?
Yes.
Did he appear as if he was out of it, like not thinking clearly?
No.
Did you have any trouble understanding him when he spoke?
No.
Did you ask him something when you found out that he had a gun? Did you ask him anything about the gun, sir?
I asked him what caliber he used.
And what did he say, sir?
9mm.
Did a police officer arrive, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell the jury what happened when the officer arrived?
He says, for my safety, I'm going to handcuff you. And he says, okay. He had his cell phone in his hand, so he kind of like tossed it on the ground. And he says, can you call my wife?
Okay, let me interrupt you a second. When you say he had the cell phone in his hand, are you speaking of the defendant, George Zimmerman?
Yes.
And you said when the officer came, he tossed it on the ground?
Yes.
He being Mr. Zimmerman tossed it on the ground?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize, I interrupted you. Did the officer ask him who shot the Trayvon Martin? I know he didn't use the word Trayvon Martin, but who shot the person?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did, at that time when the officer, I apologize, I interrupted you, when the officer asked him about a gun, what happened then?
He put him in his handcuffs, and he asked me to call his wife.
Okay. Did the officer ask the defendant whether he had a gun on him?
Yes.
And defendant indicate or point or do something related to where the gun was?
Yes.
Tell us, if you could, the circumstances related to that.
He put his right arm up, and he says, I have it here.
And had you seen the gun prior to him saying that?
No.
When the defendant put his right arm up and he indicated that he had a gun, at that time were you able to observe it?
Yes.
And where was the gun, sir?
What was the gun?
Where was it?
Where it was, it was inside the waistband holster.
Okay. Prior to that, had you seen the gun at all?
No.
Okay. And did you observe the officer then handcuff the defendant and do something with the gun?
Yes, he put it in, I guess, his utility belt so he would have control of it.
Did the officer tell the defendant he was going to put him in handcuffs?
Yes.
And defendant replied and say that that was fine?
Yes.
You mentioned something about the defendant throwing the phone on the ground. Tell us what happened regarding that, sir.
He asked me to call his wife. I said, let him put you in his handcuffs. Once he had done that, I picked up his phone, I put it in his pocket, and I zipped it up, and then I called his wife through my phone.
Okay. he asked you to call his wife, meaning the defendant asked you to call his wife?
Yes,
And you stated you picked up the cell phone
yes.
and you put it in whose pocket?
Zimmerman's pocket,
Okay. Do you know what pocket you put it in?
his left side pocket.
And why did you pick the left side pocket to put the gun in?
Why did I pick that
Yeah.
pocket? Because it was closest to me.
Okay. The defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, asked you to call his wife. Did you do that?
Yes.
Did you know her number?
No,
Did you know her before him telling you to call her?
no.
How were you able to get his number?
He gave me her number.
So did you actually dial her number?
Yes,
And did you call her?
yes,
Did you talk to her?
yes.
Tell us the circumstance of what happened what did you tell her and what did she say? And also more importantly, if the defendant said anything while this was going on.
Okay. I had a connection with her right away, and I said, your husband has been involved in a shooting. He's being handcuffed, and he's going to be held for questioning at the Sanford Police Department. And around that time, he kind of cut me off, and he says, just tell her I shot someone.
Okay. When you say he cut you off, the defendant cut you off?
Yes.
And he said what now?
Just tell her I shot someone.
Did you respond to that?
Yes.
What did you say?
Okay, well, he just shot someone.
Were you saying to his wife on the phone?
Yes, I was saying it to his wife.
In terms of when he said that, how would you describe the defendant's demeanor?
Like I was taking too long to say what I had to say.
You mentioned you saw the victim's body, a person you now know as Trayvon Martin. Did you see any movement at any time out there in his body?
No,
Did you ever hear him say anything?
no.
Now, in terms of when you heard the shot and when you ended up going outside, if you could estimate, I know you didn't have a stopwatch, how long did it take you to, upon hearing the shot, go out the garage and go outside and come into contact with the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman?
It could have been 10, 20 seconds.
When you first observed him, was your first observation that he had been in a fight and been beaten?
Yes,
Okay. Did you remain outside while the officers arrived?
yes,
Were you present when they attempted to revive or save the life of Trayvon Martin?
yes.
Could you tell us what you recall seeing or observing about that?
The first officer arrived and turned him over, and I think more were starting to come. He was asking for a bag to do compressions on his chest, and then I watched him perform CPR.
Okay. Regarding the bag, did you go somewhere and get a bag to assist the officers?
I went through the garage, and my wife handed me a bag.
Walmart bag?
Yes,
Okay. And did you come back out and provide that to the officer in an attempt to save Trayvon Martin's life?
yes.
Now, prior to that night, had you ever met George Zimmerman?
No,
Had you ever met Trayvon Martin?
no,
Were you ever involved in the Neighborhood Watch program at all?
no.
Why not?
I have work. I got other things that I have to do. I have a 6-year-old to take care of, so.
When you first came into contact with the defendant that evening, did he appear to be in shock, sir?
No,
And what is your opinion based on, sir?
he wasn't acting like anything different. I mean, he was coherent. He was responding to my questions like it was not like just like any other person.
Okay. In your actions there before the officer came, did you observe the defendant at any time look back at the body of Trayvon Martin?
No,
Did the defendant appear calm, sir?
yes.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.